Good morning and welcome to Formula One from Ida, the Pacific Grand Prix. It's race day here in Japan, and if you're with us in Europe at the moment, well, it's middle of the night virtually, but thank you for joining us. If you've just come back from the pub, or if you're just a Formula One fan and you can't bear to miss any of the action, then it's great to have you with us. We've got the race coming up later today, of course, but first of all, the half-hour warm-up. And as you can see, they're all piling out on the circuit, and it's an absolutely glorious morning here today, John.
Indeed it is, and in fact, at this time of morning, 9:30 at Tsunaki International, the ambient temperature is the warmest it's been on any of the 4 days we've been here. It's just under 20 degrees Celsius, and we're expecting that to rise, and that also may have a great bearing, not just on what we're going to watch in this 30-minute unofficial warm-up, but in fact on the Grand Prix itself. 83 laps of this circuit. It's going to be a long, tough Grand Prix. Race time last year was 1 hour 46 minutes. I would expect it to be nearer to 1 hour 50 minutes this year, and if the temperature continues to rise, that is going to be, as I say, very significant indeed.
Most of the cars out, but remember they'll be coming straight back into the pits as ever in this morning warm-up session. Just to remind you, David Coulthard will be starting from his 4th successive pole position here today. A superb qualifying performance once again, fastest in both sessions in the end, and just ahead of teammate Damon Hill. And in fact, it's the 3rd time in a row that we've had a Williams 1-2 as well.
Well, that could have been slightly different, but we saw Michael Schumacher and the Benetton Renault team spend virtually the entire Saturday qualifying session just running their car on the oldest tyres they have. They virtually decided that it wasn't worth going for pole position. They felt that it may have been just out of reach. It was only in the remaining 5 minutes that they actually put a brand new set of tyres onto that car. Michael Schumacher did improve, but he still remained 3rd quickest. Part of their thinking behind that is, well, if we weren't in a strong position to challenge for pole, they say, and it's always easy to say, they prefer to start behind pole man on the clean line than start alongside pole man on the dirty line. So Damon Hill is the man who's on the dirty line just getting into his spare car. We saw Michael Schumacher do the same in the Benetton. There is Schumacher. So the strategy already being played out by the teams even before the Grand Prix starts. Now, whether that's a decision that will actually benefit Benetton or not, well, we'll have to see. 83 laps around here is a very long way, but we're anticipating 3 pit stops for fuel and tyres this afternoon, and that in the past, as we've seen, has led to the lead change being done in the pit lane, and with overtaking, well, it's going to be a great afternoon.
John Lacey deciding to go out straight away and complete some laps, and feeling fairly confident about the race, expecting good things. He says it may be a little bit of a waiting game, as his report after qualifying yesterday. He felt that the track was a bit slower in that 2nd qualifying session, and he, like many of the others, decided to save his tyres, and that was a key thing, as you said, John. A lot of them keeping new tyres for the race itself.
I think it's absolutely vital, and even though that new tyre, and many teams will start with sticker tyres, the advantage they get may only last for 1 or possibly 2 laps, but it's that initial maybe second or a couple of seconds that you will gain that is so vital. So that is the reason why Schumacher will have 3 fresh sets of tyres, 3 new sets of tyres for this afternoon. Damon Hill, we believe, has got the same. David Coulthard almost regretted going back out in the closing moments of qualifying, because he did use a set of new tyres which, on reflection, he felt he'd rather have kept for the race. But he wasn't sure whether Schumacher, on that last 5-minute run, was going to nick pole position. He went out in preparation to defend it. He actually did go quicker, but of course the price was a set of tyres that he feels will be more valuable to him this afternoon.
It was interesting to see in that qualifying session when Schumacher was on the old tyres, he was a full 1.8 seconds slower than the others were achieving on their new tyres. So there really is a big drop-off in performance. In fact, Mark Blundell was talking about it a little bit last night and saying it's just so rapid, you know, from those first few laps on a good tyre, the speed just drops away, and that's going to be a major factor, and that's partly why we're going to see so many stops.
I think the key about the tyre performance will be not just the initial opening lap or a couple of laps. Everybody knows that new tyres will give you that time. It's whether the tyre performance remains then constant once you've gone through that initial performance barrier. Does it remain consistent, and will the times be affected more by fuel reduction, or will fuel reduction and tyre wear contribute to a loss in time? I think the general feeling is that as fuel goes down and the track conditions and the use of the tyre will change, that the times are going to ebb away, and that's why we're looking at 3 stops.
So Michael Schumacher back into the pits. John Lacey is fastest so far on a 1:18. He's the only really to have set a flying lap so far. Luca Badoa has done 1 lap, but quite a slow one. So we'll take a break, and we'll be back with the morning warm-up from Japan. Welcome back to the TI circuit here in Japan. The morning warm-up is underway. We've been running for around about 8 minutes, and Damon Hill is back on the circuit once again. It looks as though we've had somebody running wide into the gravel. We're just looking across from our commentary position to see a cloud of dust coming up from the hairpin corner, and this is just about where Damon is now. See if you can see a car off there. Maybe somebody ran a little wide, perhaps not.
Well, that's down at Atwood Corner, in fact, and Damon Hill and Ukyo Katayama make their way down too. Somebody on the, looks like on the exit of the hairpin itself, but we have to wait and see. Doesn't appear to be any yellow flags. It may just be somebody ran a little bit wide, kicked up the dust, but managed to get back onto the circuit. That's the point where all that dust was appearing from. But most everybody this morning using the oldest of tyres they have to save the best for the afternoon. The danger in doing that is that what they will have now and what they're going to have in the afternoon when the Grand Prix itself starts is going to feel quite a lot different. So teams are going to be careful not to be too cautious and try to save too much of the best of their tyres.
A few of the things to look out for, I think, from qualifying, from the performances that we saw yesterday. A very close battle behind the top 3 or 4, perhaps. We've got the 2 Ferraris running 4th and 5th. We saw a very, very close group from Eddie Irvine, Johnny Herbert, Heinz Harald Frentzen, Olivier Panis. Very, very close on their times. And in fact, Marc Blundell as well, although he didn't go any faster yesterday, his time from Friday also within that group. And I think we could see quite a train of cars going around, battling for around 6th place.
I would suspect that we're going to see 2 Williams and a Benetton just disappear, then the 2 Ferraris, and then that raft of cars, starting with Eddie Irvine, who's actually splitting the 2, well, he's behind the 2 Ferraris. So that's going to be a real battle, and of course, concern as is ever at the start of a Grand Prix, getting into that first corner, but more importantly, getting out of it. And we saw what happened last year when Ayrton Senna got almightily chopped by Mika Hakkinen. And good luck to Mika, who's sitting back in Monte Carlo recovering from his appendicitis. And Ayrton Senna, Nicola Larini then ran into the back of Senna, and of course that involved Marc Blundell as well. So 3 cars were literally taken out in that first corner.
Last year was the first Grand Prix here at Ida, and Michael Schumacher took victory. Indeed, Damon Hill tried to get past Mika Hakkinen on that first lap, but had a spin, and then Hill managed to fight his way back up the order again, but then would go out a little bit later on. So it wasn't a great weekend for the Williams team. They didn't get either of their cars into the top 6. Schumacher taking the
Schumacher in all sorts of trouble as he came around the Mike Knight corner, and he ran very, very wide indeed, and the bottom of the car bumped all over the curb, and you can see the amount of gravel that's still coming from the bottom of that car, and Schumacher slowly now makes his way down the long, or the pit straight. I was going to say long, it's not. In fact, there, the barge board on the side of the car has been damaged, and that is something that Michael Schumacher will be very disappointed about. Just shows how little grip he has running on these old tyres.
Drama then for Schumacher. Jean Christophe Boullion is fastest so far, as you saw from the classification, a 1:17.5.
Well, there we see what happens. The car just starts to drift out, runs wide, gets over the curb. Now the problems begin. And there you see the barge board gets flicked up. It just came into contact with the ground. And Michael Schumacher probably swearing to himself. And, of course, at the same time, he will be talking to the team to explain what's happened. And they will certainly be ready for him. They will see on screen, of course, there, his hand out of the cockpit, actually trying to keep that barge board in place. Pulls well over to the right. Let a car go through as it goes through Revolver Corner. And now just directly behind the pits, but still quite some distance before he can get into the pit lanes.
So Schumacher having some problems. Jean Christophe Boullion still fastest in the warm-up. Michael Schumacher right back out again. And after that little incident running wide at the Mike Knight corner, Michael Schumacher getting back out in the other car, I think, as he comes back out of the pit lane, and a chance to continue the work of the morning warm-up. Jean Christophe Boullion still fastest from Damon Hill, David Coulthard third, Gerhard Berger fourth, then Heinz Harald Frentzen and John Alesi. There is Ukio Katayama with Eddie Irvine right behind. Good job from Eddie Irvine in qualifying yesterday. Irvine qualifying in 6th place, just heading up that particular group we were talking about earlier. And looking forward to a good race. He and Barrichello running slightly different setups yesterday. Irvine with the mid-wing, Barrichello without it.
And Eddie Irvine was one of the few people who really chose to use the new tyres he had available. His philosophy is, I want to be as far to the front as possible, and I want to be able to get away with that leading group. I'm not prepared to sit maybe in the 4th row or 5th row and then have to fight with a group of cars, which in reality I'm not very much quicker than in a race. But if I can draw away with the lead group, then it may well just give me an advantage. And since the whole thing will come down to pit stops and the choice of stops, where there's going to be 2, we believe the majority of the front runners will opt for 3. So Irvine's got his own thoughts and ideas as how to approach this afternoon's Grand Prix, and certainly he used the best of his 3 sets. In fact, he did 4 runs. So interesting to see how Irvine gets on. Car with a more downforce set up than teammate Barrichello, but we've seen over the course of this year that Rubens has been, in my view, the better race driver, particularly since Canada. And so Eddie Irvine, almost his home country, wants to maybe redress that situation.
Home country in terms of, he raced here a lot, of course, in Formula 3000 in Japan, and looking to a good result. Although he didn't actually race at this circuit, the circuit here, the TI circuit, Ida, a relatively new track, opened up in 1990, created by Hajime Tanaka, a wealthy Japanese businessman, creating this track in a little bit in the middle of nowhere, as we've spoken about this weekend already. It's a beautiful setting, absolutely stunning scenery with the forested hills around. And as we drive our way up from the lower parts, we're going past rivers and lakes, and good fishing country as well, John. I think you've been tempted to bring the rod along almost.
And certainly, and it's only one of the pastimes that has become of a focal interest in Grand Prix racing. But one of the others, of course, is golf, and Mr. Tanaka has designed and created many golf courses in Japan. And unlike in Europe, or particularly in the UK, where golf is almost everybody's right, in Japan is an extremely expensive passion and background. So there will be a little Formula 1 golf competition on Monday following the Grand Prix. And I'm delighted to say I'm amongst the numbers, playing with Mr. Tanaka on one of his courses.
How is the handicap at the moment?
Handicap is always on the first tee, trying to hit the ball too far.
Michael Schumacher making his way around. He's still in a spare car after that problem, after he ran off wide in his race car, so they're busy repairing that in the Benetton pit at the moment. Schumacher currently 8th fastest. It's still Jean Christophe Boullion fastest, and that's a good performance. And we've seen the Frenchman going quite well this weekend, although he did rather spoil it and blot his copybook once again yesterday with a spin in second qualifying.
And look at Schumacher as the camera then cut back into the pits to look at Damon Hill getting out of his car, and that is an exciting piece of action if I've ever seen it. But Jean Christophe Boullion had that spin on his first flying lap, but what made it even more ironic was that he had the latest version of the ZTEC-R engine for the first time this weekend, and he said the difference in performance of the engine, the characteristics, altered the car handling, but he was honest enough to say that was not the cause of my spin, it was down to me.
Schumacher about to cross the line. Damon Hill, second fastest at the moment. Boullion still fastest. Frentzen has come up into third. Sauber looking relatively strong. Schumacher crosses the line, but no improvement, I think. No, he stays down in 9th. In fact, 1 or 2 others moving further up the order as well. Indeed, John, talking about the ZTEC-R engine, of course, a few days ago, you actually went to Cosworth to talk about the new V10 engine, which has now been run for the first time. Next year, Sauber will be running with this new V10 Cosworth unit. Indeed, Cosworth invited some of the media up to see the engine, and we saw an engine on the test bed, and we've seen various aspects of the engine, and Cosworth and Ford are very, very confident indeed that now that they've made the commitment to a proper engine, a 3-litre V10 engine, not their first V10, in fact they made a 3.5-litre V10,
But with the regulation changes coming, they decided to bin that engine and concentrate on working on a 3-litre engine. And that engine, of course, in terms of overall dimensions, is actually smaller than the current 3-litre V8, which is in the Sauber chassis. So all through the wintertime, development will continue, and that engine should see itself running for the first time in a Sauber chassis somewhere around about the end of January 1996.
Heinz Harald Frentzen also there on that occasion, his first visit to Cosworth, in fact, and expressed himself as very impressed with the whole facility, and they certainly can't fail to be impressed really by the whole Cosworth operation, building not only Formula 1 engines, of course, but IndyCar engines, and involved in other forms of racing like German Touring Car Championships. So Michael Schumacher has moved up a little bit. He's now up into 7th place, and as you've seen from the pictures, he's pushing pretty hard.
Yes, and he's slipping and sliding around a great deal, and this is where we see again there an example of just how little grip the back of that car has. We saw that in qualifying yesterday, and that was very much the consequence of using tyres that had seen quite a lot of mileage. Benetton again using tyres that would not be ideal race tyres, and the consequence of that was a massive slide we saw a couple of minutes ago here coming into Revolver Corner. Schumacher had it completely sideways on. Then we cut to Damon Hill getting out of his car in the pit lane. Well, Damon back out onto the circuit again in his T car, so he's switching from race car to T car. Schumacher also back in his T car after that very slight damage which was to the side of the barge boards during that very brief off.
Team's working hard now to try and work out what the best strategy will be, and as we say, many stops likely, 3 stops we think probably most likely, but Mark Blundell didn't put 4 stops out of the equation totally yesterday when he was speaking.
Well, to be truthful, some drivers are talking about 7 stops. They've got 7 sets of tyres, and they think conditions could be so bad that it may be advantageous, and that's going to extreme length to make a point. But that's the kind of track conditions drivers are confronted with this year. And compared to the circuit and the lap times from 1 year ago, a lot slower, 3.8 seconds slower compared to Ayrton Senna's pole time. Hard to explain it, whether it's just simply conditions, whether the track, now that it's matured and it's had other racing, there's been Japanese touring car racing and other formulas on it. Everybody expected to be much closer, but that's not to be.
And one of the points there, I suppose, is that Pacific Grand Prix last year, of course, so early in the season before the tragedies of Imola, and the cars in their 3.5 litre spec were sort of at their ultimate, weren't they? They were really high downforce, much more downforce, of course, than we have now, and perhaps it makes more of a difference on this track.
Well, certainly those cars carried a great deal more downforce, but of course they also were the first sort of versions of the post-active ride cars, so they didn't have quite as much as the active rides in 93, but by comparison to the cars, the back end of 95, they would have had, I think, a fair amount more downforce. Tyre-wise, we both had C and B compounds, so the teams had the choice between the two. A new circuit, Goodyear opted to bring a backup tyre in the event that the C was marginal in terms of wear and how the tyre reacts. And one of the problems that drivers and teams are confronted with is not just this loss of grip, but how the loss of grip is being manifest. And what happens is the tyre is scuffing itself. Damon Hill going down, just interesting, going offline in a sort of almost a vain attempt to try and clear that right-hand side of the track. That's where he's going to start the Grand Prix from. But what's happening is that cars, as they're sliding around, the tyre and the track aren't actually working in harmony. And what happens is the rubber, the top surface starts to shear off. That in turn causes loss of grip. And the only way that that ever will get cured is when the track itself conditions improve to the point where the two tyre track work together. David Coulthard now gone quickest, 1 minute 16.835, and I suppose that has to be expected.
Great overhead shots here, about halfway through the lap. That's the downhill left-hander where we've seen some problems. Now into the Piper left-hander. They're running behind the pits here. And we just switch back to the normal camera. On the left-hand side is the paddock area there and the back of the pits. And Damon Hill goes up through the left-hander at Redmond into the Hobbs corner and then completing the lap, just the last 2 right-handers. And we switch back to Michael Schumacher. But Coulthard fastest from Boullion, still second, then Damon Hill third, Frentzen fourth, Berger fifth, and Irvine sixth, with Schumacher in 7th.
I wonder now, Schumacher, he came into the pits in the T car. Again, look at Damon Hill driving down the right-hand side of the track, and that again is done purposely to try and clear where he will start from. But Schumacher into the pits in the T car. I suspect he's come back out now in his race car. The damage was only limited to the those additional pieces of bodywork which are attached to the chassis itself. We call them barge boards. Really what they provide is the channeling of air more efficiently. You take them off and the car has a lot less grip.
Coasting round now, look as though he's taking it fairly steady. I think he's probably coming in, or else he's building up to another quick lap. We often see him back right off. Yes, that's what he's doing. He's decided to set a good lap now. Here you see him really get on the power. Is he going to run wide out of that last corner? Very tidy that time, and on to start-finish straight.
So Schumacher, I suspect, back in his race car, and that lap was purposely cautious. He wants to get a definitive answer whether I shall race this car or I prefer the feel and just the characteristic of my T car. This is the car I suspect he wants to race. So by going slowly, as we saw, preparing himself, focusing his mind and making a massive commitment, and he will be making a big commitment, even on tyres that have seen better days. This is a very, very crucial part of this morning's warm-up for the Benetton team and Michael Schumacher.
So building up to maximum speed here, up to about 170 miles an hour, hard on the brakes into the hairpin right-hander. Let's just watch the balance of the car, watch for it moving around. It's looking more stable at the moment, but this is a corner where we often see it. Very smooth, very neat and tidy.
The car looks very good, but also that's Michael Schumacher driving in a very precise and neat way. Just of interest, further down the field, Olivier Panis, he's now popped up into the top 6, the 4th quickest time. So if you want to call it Benetton 2 or Ligier as we know it in Formula 1, they are also discovering that they can make quite good use of the TI circuit this morning.
5 minutes to go then in this morning warm-up session. And the temperature still building as we go through. It does look as though we're on for a very, very warm Grand Prix indeed.
Well, Michael Schumacher's lap, not particularly special, 1 minute 18.611, and that's half a second slower than his best so far in the 25 minutes or so we've been watching. As we go with Jean Christophe Boullion for the first time, I think, this weekend on board with the young Frenchman, and he still is second quickest. And whether it's just, and that of course is back with Michael Schumacher.
Yes, so just putting the title up, I think, about Boullion still being second, but we're actually riding with Schumacher once again. And remember, he's still down in 8th position. Quite a relaxed atmosphere here this weekend, no matter how the competition on circuit might be as intense as ever. And Schumacher, amongst others, trying his hard. He had a spin just at this corner yesterday in the morning free practice. Managed to avoid hitting anything. But we've seen him trying pretty hard all weekend, particularly on those old tyres in qualifying yesterday before he put the new set on. This again is looking pretty smooth.
No, it's not, Ben, because you can see just how much movement he's making on the wheel. As the camera caught that left wheel, you could see that he's working all the time to try and gain the maximum feel and commitment and confidence out of the car. So let's see what this lap for Michael Schumacher is. 1 minute 18.739, in fact a tenth slower than his last lap, and that is simply because the tyre he's on has really seen its best. But you could just see the way, look, again, the hands across the top. He's fighting like mad, but he's gaining knowledge, the team are gaining knowledge, and all this will be put into effect when it comes to the 2 o'clock start this afternoon. Again, on the way out of the Atwood corner, you can see the back starting to step out. What a driver has to do in that situation is put lock on. In some cases, you can keep the power on. In other cases, you might just check the power. Usually, you have to get right out of it.
So he continues round. Coulthard still fastest, the 1 minute 16.8, 7/10 of a second faster than Jean Christophe Boullion and Damon Hill. But all of them being very, very careful to use older tyres. So it's not giving us perhaps quite a clear indicator.
And again, just watch the way Schumacher powered the Benetton out of the Piper corner. He just got the car in and he booted it, and the car just drifted in a full 4-wheel slide. So there we have at last Jean Christophe Boullion, currently second quickest, coming on to start finish straight and coming across the line. Once again, that was a slow lap for Boullion.
I wonder if he used the newish tyres this morning, because of course he didn't do very much yesterday, having had that spin.
Well, we don't know if he's doing that, but certainly David Coulthard has got grip somewhere. He's further improved his time. He's gone 1 minute 16.831. So there will be a problem we're going to see a great deal of this afternoon as track conditions get... Oh, and there's a spinner down there. And is it the teammate of... It is Heinz Harald Frentzen. No, it's not. It's Taki Inoue.
Taki Inoue in the footwork hard, the Japanese driver. And one of the three Japanese drivers, of course, in this Grand Prix this afternoon, spins it back, pointing the right way. He's qualified down in 20th place. It's been a bit of a disappointing weekend, actually, for footwork. Remember, they've got Gianni Morbidelli back in the car this weekend, and he was rather frustrated after the session yesterday. Said he was surprised that the balance of the car wasn't better. He felt that they'd done a good job with it in the free practice session, but finding himself down in 19th place on the grid, behind both of the Tyrrells and behind the Minardi of both Luca Vidal and Pedro Lamy. So he's going to work hard this afternoon. There's an onboard picture that was going past Taki in the way, and it was all getting a little close down there.
Well, it's going to be, I think, very much like that this afternoon, and we're going to see probably a great deal of spin and cars running off the track. But also, it's not just running off the track, it's in the pit lane where problems can arise, and for a returnee to Grand Prix racing at Guri Suzuki, he was presented with a fine worth $5,000. That was for exceeding the speed limit in practice in the pit lane, 92.9 kilometers per hour. Got him a $5,000 fine, and it's a bit like driving, getting points on your license on the road. But the one that really reached the heights that nobody else reached was newcomer to Grand Prix racing, Jan Magnussen. 110.6 kilometers in the pit lane. It's an 80 kilometer per hour speed limit. He got a massive $7,500 fine. So Jan Magnussen, I think he had to look to Ron Dennis to say, Ron, can you sort of sub me $7.5 grand, please? I think Ron took it out of the petty cash in his back pocket. Wasn't a problem for him or the team. But it just goes to show that even in your first Grand Prix, there is no mercy whatsoever. And it's a lesson, I'm sure, that Jan Magnussen, come this afternoon, when it's 120 kilometers per hour in the pit lane, will be totally aware of.
So many things to think about driving a Grand Prix car, and just when you think you can relax and come back into the pits, you've got to be aware to hit that speed button and make sure that the car is underneath the speed limit. And of course, very easy for a young driver like Jan Magnussen with so much going on to perhaps just forget to hit that button. So just crossing the line then, David Coulthard, and he is fastest, and it looks as though he's going to end up with the fastest time. There are one or two still on a lap, so perhaps we'll see an improvement in the last few moments.
But it's just interesting to contrast David Coulthard with Michael Schumacher. His Williams looks so much more comfortable, and I mean the grip, you can see that car working, whereas Schumacher, clearly on much older tires, has got nothing. Again, here coming out of Atwood, the Williams just follows a path the driver sets it on. Schumacher's battling, fighting the whole way through that corner. And that's the difference in the time between Coulthard, who's fastest, and Schumacher, whose time, 1 minute 18.1, is 1.5 seconds slower.
So the last lap for everybody, and Jean Christophe Boullion still up there in second place. Damon Hill third, Olivier Panis fourth, then Heinz Harald Frentzen fifth, Eddie Irvine sixth, ahead of Berger. Schumacher down in 8th position, as we said, and John Alesi 9th, Mark Blundell in 10th position. So, an interesting warm-up. Doesn't really give us many indications for this afternoon's race, I think. I can't imagine that Michael Schumacher is going to be struggling that much come this afternoon.
No, but what I think it did indicate to me is just how good the Williams chassis looks in race trim. Now, we don't know how much fuel, of course, any driver had on, or which set of tyres out of the 7 they have available was using. But just that last glimpse of Coulthard says to me that car looks very, very good indeed. And with the confidence Coulthard is currently enjoying, he's going to be a very hard man to beat, certainly up to the first round of pit stops.
So a fascinating Grand Prix in prospect. The Williams will be on the front row. Schumacher will be third. I hope you can join us later for the Grand Prix itself.